Okay, Mr. President, 30 seconds are up.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and good evening to everyone. I have before me certification from the clerk that this meeting is in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Cooper, absent. Commissioner Gill, absent. Commissioner Graham,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Luciano, absent. Commissioner Gill,
Here.
Commissioner Mercado,
Here.
Commissioner Stevols, Commissioner Siebel,
Here.
Commissioner Vice President Pomares, absent. Commissioner President Richardson,
Here. I didn't hear you call Grant.
I believe I did, and she said she was here. Am I correct, Commissioner Graham?
Okay. All right, so let's get started.
Okay, I got him on computer.
Just
Either way, I get it.
Mr. President, just a reminder, please have your mics on. I hear conversation going.
Yes, please mute your mics if you're not speaking. First up is Department of Parks and Recreation.
Mr. President, if you don't mind, I have just a little intro to the budget process.
Absolutely. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, and members of the board. Congratulations to the board and to the county executive for getting the county through an unprecedented year of difficulties, heartaches, challenges, and trials. Getting us here for 2021 budget that is on time, continues to meet the needs of Essex County residents, requires a modest property tax increase, and maintains a healthy fund balance. The 2021 recommended budget is an $8.2 million increase versus 2020, going from $761.8 million to $770 million, a 1.0% increase with a 0.5% property tax increase. We want to thank the board for its ongoing support and look forward to exploring the details of this budget during the next 2 days. With your permission, Mr. President, the first presentation is the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs with Director Salvante, Deputy Director Hartwig, and Financial Officer Gabriel Paul.
Yes, sir. Let's get started.
Thank you, Mr. President, and the board for giving us this opportunity to present our 2021 budget. If I must say, I do look like a leadoff hitter, Wayne. That's why I'm first, just so you know. So if I may, at this time, I'd like to talk about the 2020 year revenue that the department was able to generate in these most difficult times. I believe everybody should have a copy of a graph, a pie that we sent you. It breaks down the total revenue of the department. And at this time, I want to turn it over to Kate Hartwig, who will give us an update on the operation at the South Mountain Recreation Complex on the revenue stream. Kate?
Good afternoon. As County Administrator Jackson advised, it was an unprecedented year. Early in March, on the 14th, we did close the zoo and recreation complex due to the pandemic. The zoo and its facilities remained closed until June 18th, which was approximately a 3-month closure. When the zoo and the facilities did reopen, we worked on a timed ticketed reservation system and capacity limits, which limited the zoo to 3,200 guests per day. It also eliminated a number of revenue streams within the zoo because of animal health concerns throughout the pandemic. Many of those still remain closed. And despite that, we were able to reach approximately 50% of our revenue streams as compared to last year. While we were down 50%, I still think given all of the closures and restrictions placed upon us, we were able to meet some of those goals. The arena, Cody Arena, faced similar challenges. They also closed on March 14th, and they stayed closed a bit longer, not reopening until the summer months. And at the time that they opened, they had serious capacity limits imposed upon them, and have had a delayed high school hockey season, which just resumed within the last 2 weeks. So they also saw significant decreases in revenue. That being said, I'll turn it back to our director.
So overall, Turtleback Zoo generated 5.874. Cody Arena generated 1.45 on the revenue side. In addition to that, our concessions generated 747,000. I will say, for the most part, our concessionaires were whole on the rent payment to the county. We are still working with some 2 left that we're trying to work out a payment deal. The best news I can tell you is our golf course operation this past year was out of sight. So the pandemic did have an impact in golf. Again, golf closed on March 13th, reopened again on May 2nd. In spite of being closed approximately 7 weeks, our golf rounds increased from last year was almost 26,000 more rounds of golf were played this past year, which also generated $1.1 million of more revenue compared to 2019. In 2019, we generated $3.2 million. In 2020, $4.4 million. The interesting thing when we talk about golf revenue is the rounds. And these numbers are really strong numbers that we've never seen before at our golf course facilities. Hendricks Field generated almost 4,100 rounds of golf, which is approximately 10,000 more than last year. Byrne Golf Course generated 37,000 rounds, which is approximately 6,700. And Weequahic was at Weequahic generated 34,000 rounds, which is up 7,700 rounds from the previous year. This is the first year Weequahic Golf Course broke $1 million in revenue. It was actually 1.2 million this year. So our golf operation really did exceptionally well during this pandemic time, where people were, I guess, more at home and possibly were doing business on the golf course. Whether we'll see that same number in 2021, it's hard to tell, but right now we're pleased with how we completed the year. Overall, our revenue generated was $12,530,000 for 2020. Any questions on that?
That completes your presentation?
No, I'm just talking about the revenue stream. That's
Okay.
all.
Mr.
All right.
McInerney.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'm looking at the revenue schedule within the introduced budget that I have, or I should say the budget that we were handed off. On 15,370,000, Dan, I'm looking at a number less than the 12,530,000. It's 10,551,000. Was this updated? Is that number 12,530,000 an updated number?
I'll defer that to Gabe.
Yes, the 12.5 is the end of year, December 31st. That's what we bought in our gross revenue.
Okay, so as far as the revenue report in the budget that we received, being down $4.8 million, it's down really $2.8 million from what we anticipated in 2020. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm just curious. I mean, I'm assuming that the correct number was used in the annual financial statement when we calculated our surplus and our results of operation. But I would ask the administration if they could just check on that, which number was used in the annual financial, the AFS, which is not released. I have some copies of some of the pages I received today, but I would just be curious about that to make sure that the correct number was was posted in the AFS. What I'd like to do is just kind of go through briefly each department within the Parks and Recreation. There's a lot of similarity with the 2021 budget versus the 2020. I'm not going to dwell on areas where there's a request for really very little increase other than collective bargaining increase, but I will look at other expenses and may have some question on those. So let's start with the Office of the Director. Dan, there's really 4 positions there, and only thing that looks like is increasing there is based on contractual increase. Actually, that number has gone down as opposed to up. I'm sorry, it's down $10,983 from what it's showing me. A little difference there between what I've got on one of the budget sheets and what's on the Office of the Director sheet, the summary sheet. But anyway, there's really no increase there other than the collective bargaining increase. And there's very little increase in the $20,000 increase in the salaries and wages. Actually, I'm sorry, there's a 0 increase in other expenses.
Correct.
So let's move on to Office of the Director. Again, the salaries and wages, $359 last year, $376 this year. Seem to be just increases in the salaries and wages based on negotiated increases. The same amount of employees in Office of Director Environmental Affairs, 5 last year and 5 this year. And other expenses are up. There's a significant increase in other contractual expenses under Environmental Affairs. It went from 38,000 up to 58,000. Dan, it's up 52%. Can you give us a reason for that?
Yeah. Gabe, you got the environmental center one there?
Yes, I'm looking at it right now. So for the environmental center, the only reason that it would have gone up is because we have to continue to focus in with our point of sale system for 2021.
What was that again, Gabe? I didn't hear that.
The increase for environmental center, we have to do our point of sale system. So now it's coming from each department, each call center is now putting in a part of our POS system. We're all taking part of that.
All right, thank you. All right, let's look at administrative services. Same amount of employees, 5 last year, 5 this year. Salaries increased from 343 to 353, which was what was expended last year. And other expenses, in fact, do increase. No, other expenses stay the same at $231,000. So the very little increase in administrative services. So let's move on. Engineering, 66,000 in salaries in 2020 adopted. Expended was 68,000, and that's what's recommended this year as well. No increase. Well, it was a $5,000 increase in the other expenses, which is what was expended last year. I have no questions on that. Engineering, I have no questions on engineering. It's the same amount as what was in the previous year. South Mountain Arena. South Mountain Arena salaries and wages increased from 713,000 up to 733,000. Again, I'm assuming seems to be an increase in the temporary help, a fairly significant increase in that, about $80,000. Is there more reliance on the temporary help in the arena as opposed to the salary and wages of employees? Dan, that goes from 109,800 up to 190,000.
Was, Gabe, is that the actual or the?
Yeah,
budget?
that was the increase, from 109 to 190, and that's with our temporary help. So these are our seasonal employees. These are not our full-time employees, and, you know, with certain hours, you know, they fluctuate during the season. We're hoping that with COVID going away, we're expecting our temp numbers to increase as far as employees that we plan to hire to cover all the classes and additional programs that we offer there.
Was there a reason it was down $80,000 to $80,000? Was that COVID related? The fact that,
It was down because of the pandemic. We weren't able to do certain programming.
okay. Okay. All right, let's move on to parking deck. And there's a $10,000, $6,000 increase in salaries and wages. There's a significant increase in other expenses in the area of maintenance and repair and contractual services. From 30,000 to 80,000 and from 1,000 to 78,000 in contractual. Could you explain the increases there?
But the increases there are pretty much, we have 3 parking deck now. So we're taking into consideration of properly maintaining the 3 parking decks at the arena now. So that includes, you know, our maintenance and repairs, the ticketing for the people that pay us monthly. So that's really the bulk of what is the increase for our parking decks.
It's the third parking deck is what you're saying.
Correct.
Do with that, okay. I forgot about that. All right. Let's look at Turtleback Zoo. Turtleback Zoo increases from $4,141,000 in salaries and wages in 2020 to $4,353,358. 41 positions budgeted last year, 41 this year. How many vacancies do you have there now? It looks like you have about 5 vacancies. 5.
Dan?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Yeah, sure. How many vacancies do you have right now in the Turtleback Zoo?
We have 4 vacancies.
Okay. And you're gonna fill those?
Yes,
Dan, you're gonna fill those vacancies?
yes, we are.
Okay. And again, temporary help here, was budgeted at 1.9 million. Do you know how much was expended of that? I don't have those numbers in the budget here.
Gabe, you have that number?
It looks like we spent around 1.5 this year.
So that's really a decent amount, given that was mostly from what? The fact that it's up to 1.6.
That's our seasonal help. So those are the people who are working at boats, ropes, golf, as well as the zoo. So when we're open, you know, we try to fill each call center, you know, so that we don't have any issues.
Did the increase in the golf activity obviously have something to do with that, or appears it did?
Well, actually, golf was closed until May 7th this year, just like the zoo was. So we really didn't start our operation until May there, as well as zip lines and boating.
Right.
So, that also includes seasonal maintenance as well, Frank, within the entire complex, not just the zoo.
Right. Okay. All right. And we still use, we still have open space money that we use for maintenance as well, right? Throughout the parks, not just
throughout the park system. Yes.
Okay. And overtime is budgeted at the same as it was in the prior year. So again, that number is the other expenses are relatively the same. and the salaries and wages are increased, both through the collective bargaining process as well as, maintaining the temporary help at 1.9 million. How many vacancies? You have 4 vacancies there, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on to the golf courses. And again, there's very little increase here from 1,676,000 in salaries and wages in 2020 to 1,701,000. And that appears to be mostly contractual increases. There's still a bit of longevity paid to employees in parks.
Yes.
Is that something that eventually evaporates soon, or is that something that's?
As long as they retire, yes, then it goes away.
But it's people who have been kind of grandfathered in on the longevity rates, correct?
Right, yes.
I mean, we're not giving out longevity in parks at this point, correct?
No, that stopped several years ago.
Yeah, it's not. And again, the temporary help is the same as it was in 2020, as well as the overtime. So there's very
Yes.
little increase there as well. And let's move on to maintenance and support services. There's a $100,000 increase in salaries and wages. I'm assuming that's mostly contractual because the temporary help and the overtime stayed relatively the same. And as far as other expenses go, there is a significant increase in one line item. The non-professional jumps from 589,500 to 1,048,868. Could you explain that?
Gabe?
That's just, if you look at it overall, in maintenance, we stayed flat. What we did was we just moved monies around to fund that line item there where you see the 1 million.
Yes.
That's what was charged there. That's what we overexpended by in that line item. But if you look all the way at the bottom, we're actually staying flat in maintenance. There's no increase.
And you won't have that same increase in non-professional this year. You're putting it back down to what it was budgeted in 2020. So
Right. That's what we're aiming towards, is spending what we actually budgeted.
Okay. As far as vacancies here, it shows that the vacancy number is listed at 444,002, but there's only six vacancies. So is that 6 vacancies is the 444,000?
Correct.
One of the things I want to mention too is that when I was going through the payroll register, there's a significant amount of people who show they've gotten their pay I looked at the first pay period, and then it gets reversed. So what I found out was that those people who show up in the payroll register with their salary, then their salaries reversed out, are people on leave as opposed to vacancies. So it's difficult when you're counting employees to try to determine how many of these employees, which is the differential, are on leave or how many are vacancies. Do you have a number of people on leave?
Gabe.
I'm not sure exactly how many people are on leave, to be honest with you. I would have to do a report with our payroll department and I can get that information over to you.
Yeah, I didn't, on parks, I didn't calculate it. On some of the others I did, and it's pretty significant in some areas. And again, they show up in payroll and then the payroll's reversed. And from what I've been told from management and budget is that, again, those are employees that are on leave. And we'll come back. So if you have employees that are on leave, they are budgeted for. I don't know if they're budgeted for the full year, but I'm assuming those positions are still held and not included in vacancies. So, let's go to arts and cultural fairs. There's a 4% increase in the salary and wage line item. From 528,000 to 549. There's no change in the amount of positions, and the overtime is budgeted at the same and very close to what was charged in 2020. Other expenses are increased. There's a significant increase again in other contractual, which jumps from 215,000 to 402,000, and also non-professional from 135 to 242. So overall, other expenses are increasing 291,000 in this division. Can you explain that? Just give me an idea of what those increases are.
And so those increases would be for our renewal for the summer concerts, which we did not hold this year, which is a big significant amount that we charge every year to our budget. And I believe that's the bulk of it, to be honest with you, Frank, is our summer concerts.
Those concerts weren't budgeted for in 2020?
Yes, they were, but we didn't use it.
Well, I'm asking you the difference in cultural affairs. I mean, according to this, you charge 394,000 against 397. So I'm just trying to understand how that can be. In other words, if they were in there, there should be no reason to increase by these amounts. If they weren't in there, then I can understand it. So can you take a look at that and get back to me on that?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, because again, if they were in there, I just don't understand why the increase.
Right. Yes, I follow you. I can take a look into that, see exactly what.
And that's in both those areas. Other contractual, which goes up 187,500, and also the non-professional at 107,500.
Correct. I see exactly what you're talking about.
Now, down below it says there's 84,000 in vacancies. Is that, if you look on one of the pages that details the salary and wages by base salaries and overtime, and then list all the expenses, I just want you to take a look at that 84,000 that goes into the total amount budgeted for salaries and wages in arts and cultural affairs. There doesn't appear to be any vacancies here. There's 8 positions filled, and yet there's $84,000 listed in vacancies there. So can you take a look at that also and get back to me, unless you know something you can explain now?
Sure.
Okay, I think it probably just needs to be put up in base salary. Because I don't believe there are any vacancies here. Unless there's one and it's not listed. Okay, that's pretty much it. As far as Parks and Recreation goes, when you look at the overall budget, it's up approximately $1 million from the previous. Should say a little bit less, 900,000 from the previous, and the larger portion of that, about 500,000, is in salaries and wages, and the other portion is in other expenses. I'll wait to hear back from arts, the other expenses in arts and cultural affairs, but there was an explanation for the other expenses in Parks and Recreation for everything else. So,
Through you, Mr. President, for the record, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Luciano has joined us.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Sebo.
Okay. On the email that was sent to us, it shows the revenue from 2015 through 2020, and we're down this year compared to all those other years. How will that affect the work, Dan, of the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs? Will that loss of revenue affect you?
Well, it doesn't affect us from an operating standpoint, but hopefully we're not going to have a year like we just had, and those numbers are going to increase
I know.
on the revenue stream.
Well, how will it affect us? This is the lowest. I mean, in 2015, it was,
Well, so what
It
I'm
was
I'm
higher.
assuming is that we're going to be able to still stay open compared to the previous year. We were closed for 8 weeks. So if the trend is right now the way it is, that we can function at a certain amount of individuals coming to our facilities, I'm confident you're going to see an increase on the revenue from what we did last year.
so you're not going to have to cut back on anything because of the lack of revenue.
I don't think so.
Okay. That makes me feel better. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? I just have a quick comment. You can, Director Salvante, you can thank Commissioner Johnson for the uptick in golf rounds.
I noticed that, especially at Weequahic.
That's right.
His home
Exactly.
course.
All right, please continue.
I think we're done with parks unless somebody else has a question. We can move on to health and rehabilitation.
All right, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the evening.
Mr. President, Mr. Del Guardio is here.
Good
Okay, let's get
afternoon.
it. How are you?
Mr. Del Gaudio's here.
Thank you. Let's get started.
Good afternoon, Board of Commissioners and President and Vice President. I have along with me today Patricia Keenan, who's the Assistant Director, and Jackie Campoverde, who is our Budget Manager for the hospital center. Just a quick summary, 2020's been a rough year from us, but from a financial standpoint, our revenue was slightly above what was expected for the year, even though our patient days were down. And looking forward for the year 2021, our state aid goes up by about $160 and change per day per patient. So as long as we can maintain our patient days to where they should be, we're anticipating some significant revenue increases for 2021. Overall, recruitment has been a bit difficult since nurses are in high demand and paraprofessionals are in a high demand right now. But I think we've done well. And when we go through the numbers, I can give you an explanation of where we are on our vacant positions. I have to give credit to our staff. There's been some real troopers here that have been here every day and have worked through the pandemic. We've had numerous patients, positive patients, and working with our staff that are still having positive diagnosis. We test weekly, our patients and our staff here at the hospital center. We're lucky enough to do it in-house, and that program continues, has been working well for us in the early identification, keeping the spread from our patients. So other than that, I'm prepared for questions.
Mr. President?
Mr. McInerney.
Okay, so in the summary page for health and rehabilitation, which is in tab 12, shows that the salaries and wages, no, this is for the entire health and rehabilitation department. Salaries and wages increase $495,000 on $25,037,000, which is a 2% increase, which I'm assuming Mr. Del Guardio is basically just the increase, the contractual increase. I know you have, things like vacancies. We'll talk about that in a second, but for the most part, I would assume that the 2% increase of approximately $500,000 in salary and wages is for is to fulfill the collective bargaining agreements.
That's correct.
Okay. So also when you get to Other expenses, again, we'll go through the departments, but went from 13,859 to 13,859 to 14,159. There's a $300,000 increase in other expenses in the hospital center. So overall, there's in general roughly about a 2% increase in the overall budget of the entire health and rehabilitation department. Right now, according to your personnel summary, there's 49 vacancies that you have, or is that about right at this point in time?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And again, this is mostly in nursing.
Well, I'm showing 44 vacancies. The majority are in nursing.
Right.
And for various reasons, but right now there's 28 vacancies in nursing.
Okay. Are you finding, Frank, that do you have people on leave as well? Are there
Yes.
people? Okay. Do you happen to know?
We have 6 in nursing that are FMLA no pay, so they didn't show up on the first payroll register.
Well, what happens is on the payroll register, I noticed, and I was told by management and budget, they do show up as a payment, but then they get reversed. So they have no impact on that. And that's how I was able to determine. I didn't know, exactly at the time why that was, but then, as I said, I learned that it was people on leave. So it gets a little confusing, again, to try to understand what's the disparity in positions. Is it vacancies or is it, people on leave? So that's.
Yeah, so there is a total of 6 on leave and 1 in general services. So overall, entire hospital is 7 on leave, and then the vacancies is something we're working on. We could discuss further. The remainder are vacancies.
Yeah, we'll wait till we get to nursing on that, but, okay, so let's move on to the Office of Director. Again, there was an increase here in other expenses. I think that's probably wrong. Is that correct? That it 21,000, 2020 on the summary sheet?
It's a little confusing because the Office of the Director is the mental health administrator, which is apart from the hospital center. That's Dr. Scarpelli's office.
Excuse me, Frank, this is Annette de Blasio. That's a typo. The other
Okay.
expenses, the 210,000, that's the hazmat, Frank?
Right.
Right,
The
that's
contract,
That's what Nutley, that,
correct.
okay. All right, so as far as Office Director, again, just to look at that, there's no increase in salaries and wages and no increase in other expenses. Let's move on. Right, the hospital center, bear with me a second. 24,981,000 versus 25,474,000. That increase is again around 2%. There's $492,000 increase, roughly a 2% increase. And that again is, I'm assuming, just a contractual increase, more or less.
Yes.
So salaries and wages in that department increases 2%. There's approximately 50 vacancies in here at this time.
Well, our count is 44 total. And that other 7 with the on leave.
It's
So
on
that,
leave.
the number, yeah, it should be
That's
51.
50, okay.
Yeah, and the leaves vary, whether it's suspension or medical leave,
Right.
and positions we can't fill pending hearings.
Gotcha. All right, so, and then when we get to other expenses, there's 6,224,000 versus 6,524,000, roughly a $300,000 increase. There's some decreases too that kind of offset the increase in other services or other contractual, I think it is, in the hospital center. goes from 2,500,000 to 2,900,000. It's about a $400,000 increase in that. Could you explain that increase, Frank?
Yeah, the majority of that were contractual increases for the housekeeping services.
Right.
They had given us, we had a 3-year contract with Hudson Community Development, and they put in a 1.7% increase for 2021. That makes up the majority of that increase. It's a large contract. Some of them are for some of our IT upgrades that are necessary, which do not fall under capital. They're for consulting services for computer systems. But those were relatively minor, those numbers. But the majority was wrapped up in our housekeeping contract increase, and all the other contracts remained constant. The large contracts, dietary, which is paid out of purchasing, and pharmacy.
Okay. When I look at the detail of the salary reconciliation, there's something called additional adjustment, 779,454. What is that?
I don't know, I'm gonna ask Jackie to help on this one.
That is actually the retro pay for the CWA and Genesso members. Their contract was not signed for 18 and 19, was not approved and signed, I think, until January of 2020.
Okay, so this is a salary reserve for contractual increases.
Correct.
Because those contracts have yet to be negotiated, correct?
So they were negotiated, but they didn't, by the time they were negotiated, there wasn't time to do the payout, so they were included. Those numbers were set in reserve for those 2 years.
Okay. And
We
you're
budgeted for them, but they weren't paid out in those 2 years. We finalized the contract in 2020.
So this is the accumulation of those increases, those retros for 2018 and 2019?
Correct.
And what about 2020?
Now, those are all have been budgeted and they're accounted for.
Okay. And 2021, did the contract go to 21?
Yes.
Okay. So all, other than 18 and 19, all other contractual increases have been put in the salaries.
Well, there was a slight delay on 20 because of the Genesso, the nurses contract wasn't approved until around September of 20. So some of that was included into that reserve that was set aside.
Okay, so 18, 19, and 20 are in the reserve. 21 would be up in the base salaries.
Correct.
Okay. And in terms of overtime, how is it in hospital center? Overtime last year was about $1.8 million. We're budgeting 920,000. I mean, it stands to reason you're using the vacancies that you have in different parts of the budget to fund the overtime.
Yeah, in a perfect world, that's an accurate number. But, trying to forecast things like a pandemic and what have you, that number hasn't changed in years. We've kept the overtime budget pretty constant there, which we make up in the other salary reserve, but we're a little bit over what we spent in 2020. I mean, a little bit over for the year for 20 than where we were in 19. I mean, if we're fully staffed and what have you, that is a realistic number.
Right.
But, it's hard to forecast what's going to happen this year.
So because you have those vacancies, and especially in nursing, the salary savings there is really going, as I said, to fund, is really the cost for the overtime as well.
That's correct.
Let's look at hospital center administration. The salaries and wages were $1,298,000 in 2020, and they're $1,306 in 2021. So there's a slight increase in that, roughly around 2%. Other expenses were 406 and they are down to 295. Why did expenses go down, Frank?
I think there's some, I'm trying to figure out the discontinuation, something that we definitely didn't need. I'm trying to remember. Jackie, do you remember that category? What we eliminated? There was a big chunk of money that was eliminated out of that category. Or transferred to another account. I'm not recalling off the top of my head.
Okay, all right. And there's 4 vacancies up, or roughly four vacancies in the hospital center administration.
I have it as 2.
Okay.
I'm showing it as 2.
All right.
One is a vacant title. That is, there's an employee who's in a trainee title and would progress into that one vacancy. And the other title we didn't fund for the budget. That other vacancy, it was a clerk, account clerk typing, a senior account clerk. We didn't fund that for the year. It showed it as a vacant position.
How did the COVID grant money impact? Were you able to charge off some salaries and wages to the grant, the COVID grant that we received?
Well, the way we did it, the hospital received separate COVID money.
Okay.
And there was a few stipulations in that. So we're currently in the process. We're using that for our testing. Some salary offset for some contract nurses we needed to go out and get. But the initial overtime was done through the FEMA application. We covered it through FEMA. And some of the COVID before we were given this grant money, but we'll offset working with Anthony Abaleo to charge it back against our grant. About $960,000 that we received.
That was the total amount you received?
Yes, two installments. We brought it to the board for approval and budget insertion. So we've been winding down that account, and primarily from our testing, our weekly testing, we're paying for it that way. But most of the supplies and everything of that nature came from the CARES Act funding, the general CARES Act funding.
The 139 million that we received, that
Right, and the hospital monies were also permitted to offset operating losses, but we didn't have any. So we couldn't put in a claim for our lost revenue.
You were saying before that the revenues were good, and
we were anticipating a revenue loss, but how the numbers worked out, because a lot of patients weren't going out on weekend passes and what have you, it pretty much balanced out to exactly where we were the year before.
all right, well, I'll have to get there because of the revenues increase in 2021, correct?
It will increase, correct?
Like substantially,
Substantially,
like 10 million, 10 or 11?
Yes. Correct. We forecast 11 million. That's with a daily census of 160.
And why is that so much different than last year? We didn't have a census of 160 on a consistent basis?
No, what happens is it's a cost report from 2 years prior. It's based
Right.
on your days and how the calculations work. They figure it out what all your costs and expenses are. And that's how we came out for 2021. That's where the number came out. I mean,
So-
2 years ago, it was decreased slightly. And this year it's up by about $160 per day.
But that would assume that 2 years ago you had significantly more cost associated with running the hospital center.
Well, more costs and
More indirect cost.
patient days. It's all based on patient days and reimbursement.
Right. Okay. All right, let's move on to hospital center facility maintenance. That's the same as it was last year. And general services are budgeted at the same amount for salaries and wages and the same amount for other expenses. They're up $30,000 on salaries and wages, which would equate to roughly the contractual increase. So I don't have any questions on general services. Medical services, $5,987,000 last year, $5,991,000 this year. They were, however, expended was just over $5 million. So there was some salary savings last year as well in that department. So you're fully funding all positions in the medical services.
There's one we're not funding. It was a leave from our staff psychiatrist to medical director. We did not fund that position for the 2021 proposed budget.
And how many vacancies do you have here, Frank?
We have 12 vacancies in this department.
Okay.
Some of them we're in process. We've identified candidates. And our big areas are psychiatrists, where we're down 3 psychiatrists right now.
Are those full-time positions of psychiatrists?
Yes.
All right, so again, basically, there's not a big increase at all in what was budgeted last year in salaries and wages, and a slight increase in other expenses. Let's move on to nursing services. And again, this is where, we usually see a good deal of vacancies. You say right now there's 28 vacancies here?
Correct, total.
Okay.
That includes 6 FMLA and no pay and 2 suspensions. And we had 4 attendants in orientation today. And
There
next
was
week,
12 down there, right? We're down about 12 there?
correct, but we have 4, which will bring us up. I mean, that always has some room in it,
Right.
plus or minus, and with the per diems. And then we have another orientation class coming in I believe 2 weeks, which includes RNs, nurses. So due to COVID, we can't bring them all in at the same time, and that's delayed some of our hiring.
And nursing expenses are the same as they were in the prior year, 115,900.
Correct.
Let's move on to hospital center therapies. And there's an increase from $1,420,000 to $1,005,000, about $88,000. And then from other expenses, we're $14,000 this year and $14,000 last year as well. Seems to be one. Is there a vacancy there?
There's one vacancy for a recreation therapist.
Okay.
We had a resignation late in the year that we're working on replacing right now.
And the increase is basically the contractual increases?
Correct.
Maintenance of patients at state institutions is a payment. It's the same as it was last year, $7,150,000. As well as the other institutions, $275,000 for other expenses in 2020 and in 2021 as well. So despite ups and downs, within the individual, divisions or cost centers of health and rehab, we still go back to the summary page where there's only a 2% collectively, a 2% increase of $495,000 in salaries and wages, and the $300,000 increase in other expenses, which you've explained. And at this point in time, there's 44 vacancies, correct?
That's correct.
So again, 2% increase in salaries and wages and a 2.2% increase in other expenses. I don't have any other questions, Mr. President.
Mr. McInerney. Mr. Polavecchio, any questions?
No, I don't have any, Mr. President. Thanks.
Commissioners?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Commissioner
President.
Sebo.
I just have a comment. Frank, I listen to what you have to say every week in terms of what is going on at the hospital center. And I just want to say that due to the coronavirus, I think you're doing an exceptional job there, making things run as best as you can. So I think you should be very, very pleased that things are going so well for you there, because these are terrible times. And it's great to hear your report every week. Thank you.
All right, through you, Mr. President, I thank you, but one illness here is too many for us, and that's the way we've been trying to keep it. It's just impossible to keep it out of the facility. All the steps we've taken and all the measures we've instituted, it's been a challenge for us.
I know that, but you're right on top of it and you're watching it carefully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DelGuardia. Next up, Public Works.
Mr. Voorhees, you're on, sir.
Good afternoon. Again, last year was a tough year for us, and actually we were here throughout the year. This year we hope could be better, but all the services we usually do were provided to the citizens of the county, and we hope to do the same thing this year. I just want to give a synopsis of what is Public Works. We have 6 divisions: engineering, planning, roads and bridges, mosquito control, fleet, then buildings and grounds. On top of that, we have 2 statutory boards, which is the planning board and the appeals board, which is the construction board of appeals. We also support the parks department with the capital projects. We have our yearly capital projects, which is approximately $15+ million. On top of that, we have state grants and federal grants. We expect a large amount of federal grants this year. We have $26 million in safety grants, $2.5 million in a special grant for traffic on South Orange Avenue. As you may know, there are 3 inter-county bridges, or 4 inter-county bridges we have. One is Kingsland Avenue Bridge, Clay Street, Bridge Street, then Jackson Street. Out of the 4, 3 bridges are in replacement program with NJTPA. We graduated the planning phase. We are going into the design phase in the coming year. Each bridge is like $8 million in design itself, and the construction will be around $50 to $100 million each bridge. And again, that will be a multi-year project. And we have state grants on top of it, which is approximately $9.5 million in annual transportation program. And then we have bridge grants and then discretionary grants, which is around total of 10 plus 3, $13 million. Our operating budget is, as you can see, it's almost same as last year. The salary, actually, we moved a couple of staff from one division to another division, and still within the contractual increase, and our total increase is around 3%. And our other expenses have reduced from last year. As you may know, we have a snow trust fund, which is $5.7 million, and we have a mosquito trust fund, which is $422,000. So we reduced our snow money for this year for operating funds by $1.2 million. And there's a total net reduction in other expense for the department. And the increase is in the buildings and grounds. As you may know, last year we budgeted for actually only for half a year, because we started the DFAB building in the middle of the year. That building, which we budgeted for 6 months, and this year we had budget that building for full year. And we expect a new building coming on board this year, MLK, the new building, which will be coming on board by May 15th or end of May. And also we commissioned last year the parking deck, the employees parking deck on Market Street. That's the synopsis of what we have, and I am here to answer any questions. I have my staff with me here, and they will assist me if needed.
Thank you, Mr. Vice. Mr. McInerney.
Sanjeev, I'm looking at the summary page for Public Works. We're saying a increase of 344,000 in salaries and wages, kind of spread out among the various cost centers. Salaries and wages was 9,173,000 this year, 9,517,000. That's a $344,000 increase.
Yeah, last year we did not fund, even though it was in the budget, a couple of positions which we are funding this year. In engineering, we have a lot of grant projects are coming on board, and that is those two positions were available last year, but we didn't fund fully, and that is getting funded this year. But if you look at the whole thing, it's still within that 3%, 3.8% range.
That's correct. So I'm looking at last year's planned positions was 103, this year's 105. So those are the two positions. Those are two new positions that have to be funded out of that $344,000 increase.
Again, we expect grant funds will compensate those. Again, it's a lot of capital projects, grant projects coming on board, and those people were there last year, we didn't fund them.
So you're saying that the two new positions that bring you from 103 to 105 are funded by grants?
Yes.
Okay. So then the 344,000, are there any, there's no new positions in that, or that's basically contractual?
It's basically contractual.
Well, Division of Engineering jumps about 10% up to 122,000, 123,000.
That actually, engineering has a couple of people from buildings and grounds, and it's actually people move from one division to another division. Its number of headcounts are the same.
Okay, so again, outside of those two positions, it's pretty much the same as the previous year.
Yes.
The personnel summary shows that you have about, at least at the time of this printing, about 10 vacancies in your department at this time. Is that correct?
Yes, we lost a couple of people during COVID, and we didn't get a chance to fill them. One person passed. Two people didn't even come back after COVID. A couple of people are still sick, and they're using the sick days.
Are those, again, you weren't here when I brought this up before, but in going through the payroll register, I noticed that people's salary shows, their biweekly, their biweekly salary shows up in the payroll register, but it's reversed, and those are people on leave. Are in the vacancies, are you including those leaves?
But those are in the active payroll because they are listed under the payroll, so they're not under the vacancy.
Sanjeev, you're breaking up. I don't know if you can hear me.
The vacancies are 10 vacancies we have. There are more people than the 10 vacancy which are not showing up. There are at least 4 people in the payroll who doesn't show up because they didn't come back from COVID.
I got you. Okay, so 10 vacancies, 4 people out on leave.
Yes.
So let's as far as other expenses, and we'll get to those in buildings and grounds and roads and bridges, but as you said, every year we're starting to fund more and more capital improvements out of the operating budget. There's an increase in other expenses in buildings and ground of $10.7 million. Is all of that capital, as well as a $6 million increase in roads and bridges. Are those two amounts pretty much appropriations, current appropriations for capital improvement?
The roads and bridges have a reduction of $1.2 million. If you look at that, the buildings and grounds, because of the 3 buildings we are coming on board this year, the MLK building, which we expect to have on board by end of May, and DFAB building 321 University Avenue, which we only budgeted half the year last year. So this year it's full year.
Full year for, okay, let's go through we'll see what the detail is on those increases. So Office of the Director Cost Center, pretty much the same as it was prior year, except for contractual increases. I don't have any questions on that. When you go to ground on a summary basis, there's only a $62,000 increase in salaries and wages, which is less than 2%, 1.8%. There's some reduction in the Director of Buildings and Grounds. So it was $3,430,000 last year, $3,492,000 this year. Again, 1.8% increase. I'm fine with that. So if you go to the other expenses, there are increases here. Let me just bear with me a second. $1,700,000.
Yep, that is the line item which I just told you about. That is the line item we are going to use for University Avenue. If you remember, when we came up with the capital project for University Avenue DFAB building, we are saving the rent at Rector Street, and we showed the expenditure at University Avenue, and that's how we showed that there is a net zero-sum game, but there is an expense in maintaining that building, and that is this, and that in that 763, all that things which we need for fire suppression, fire alarm, generator, elevator, BMS, garbage, all those things are included in there.
So those 10,700,000 in this is basically part of that increase which is like $1 million or 900,000 is basically, as you said, this is more annualized, these expenses based on the building being completed in 2021.
Yes.
Let's go to let's just look at administration on buildings and grounds. Again, the salaries and wages are the same. The expenses, which we went through already, this is all part of the buildings and grounds that we just looked at the summary sheet. For Hall of Records, buildings and grounds, salaries and wages are the same. They're up 50,000 on almost $3 million. No change in the amount of positions. Buildings and grounds, hospital center. There's a slight increase from $2,379,000. Other expenses, $2,480,000. Building maintenance, hardly any increase in salaries and wages, $481,000 to $494,000, and no increase in other expenses or positions. And general repair, it went from $69,000 to $100,000. Engineering, Office of the Director. Let me go here now.
Those are the 2 positions I talked to you about before, that 14 to 16. One is a planning aide and one is the assistant engineer.
In engineering, I think you already explained that.
Yes.
Let's go to planning. In the planning, we're at 355,000. 541 up to 365,754, 2.9% increase. And I'm assuming most of that is contractual, if not
Yes.
all of it. It's $10,000. And the positions were 4 in 2020 and 4 in 2021.
And we get a grant from TPA to subsidize the expense.
Right, that's the 55,820.
Yes.
Okay. Fleet management, salaries and wages are 683,000 versus 718,000, increase about 34,000 or 5%. And that's that. Okay, roads and bridges, 3,195,520 in 2020, 3,264,78. That's exactly a 2% increase or $64,000. Those are contractual. There's no increase in the amounts of positions, 35 in 2020 and 35 in 2021. Here as well, if the summary is. And that's pretty much it. So when we look at the overall budget, we're seeing a very, very slight increase of 105,000 between salaries and wages and other expenses. Goes from 27,341,000 to 27,447,000. So it's like a 0.4% increase overall in your entire budget for your entire department. I don't have any other questions, Mr. President.
Through you, Mr. President, I want to acknowledge the joining of this hearing of Commissioner Cooper and Commissioner Vice President Pomares.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions, Mr. Polavecchio?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Commissioner Sebo.
Yeah. Sanjeev, the forecast is for snow tomorrow and also later on this week. So I have two questions related to that. I'm sure you're all prepared for the snow. And my other question is, since it's the end of January and we haven't had any, what happens to the money that was appropriated for snow removal? Does that get held over till next year?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we have a trust fund. Right now, the trust fund is $5.7 million. We reduced our snow budget this year by $1.2 million. Last year, I returned approximately $3 million back because we had a good snow year last year.
Right.
$3 went back to the general treasury last year.
And hopefully it will be like that this year. Thank you. Thanks for your great work.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. McInerney.
We took money out of that snow reserve in the beginning of
Parks storm related expenses.
Has all that money been returned to that reserve?
That money was for the parks work at for the storm damage, and there is FEMA money available for reimbursement. That has not been done yet.
But what I'm saying is that reserve for snow plowing at an amount that it would have been had we not taken money out of it at one point in time to pay for COVID expenses that we were incurring at the time.
All the COVID expense money was returned, yes.
Okay, all right, so that's all I wanted to know.
Commissioners, any other questions? Hearing none. Mr. Jackson, you want to
Mr. President,
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
President, I have a question. Thank you.
Commissioner Gill.
Just wanted, can I get an update? Where are we on the Six Corners project on Bloomfield Avenue in Montclair?
Mr. Commissioner, as you know, it's a federal project, and we went for bid. The bids came back, but it has to be approved by the DOT. We sent it to the DOT, and they reviewed the bids, and their civil rights people did not accept the bids. So we are out for rebid for that job right now.
Okay. Does that also, is the bid for all of the, is the other Six Corners, or I'm sorry, the other intersections from the Eastern Gateway to the Western Gateway, a separate?
It's in that same package.
Bid or a separate project, separate from that?
Yes,
that bid?
the Montclair corridor is in one package, and there is a separate package which went through and which is under construction.
Okay. So that one's already started?
Yes.
Okay. But we would still need to do the Six Corners as a part of the, that.
The bids are coming back on February 19th, and
Okay.
it still has to go to the DOT for approval. As soon as it comes back approved, we'll go into construction.
Okay. So that would be done then concurrently with the other intersections, essentially.
And we have more intersection this year. We have a lot more money this year than last year.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Jackson, would you please introduce the next partner?
Certainly, Mr. President. The next presenter is Mr. Ramos and his team from Citizen Services.
Mr. Ramos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to take this opportunity to thank the Board of Commissioners for allowing us to present our 2021 departmental budget. Your support was instrumental in the year 2020 in enabling us to continue to provide services to our residents despite some of the restrictions that were associated with the pandemic. COVID-19 affected our department directly, affected a number of our employees, and resulted in the passing of 4 of our team members. We implemented a rotating schedule during this time period in order to reduce the number of staff reporting to our service centers, namely 50 South Clinton Street and 320 and 321 University Avenue. We equipped some of our employees at the Division of Family Assistance and Benefits with laptops and cell phones to enable them to work from home. And these are just some of the adjustments that we had to make departmentally in order to be able to provide services during this difficult period. Specifically, the year 2020 marked our successful transition from 18 Rector Street to the state-of-the-art 321 and 320 University Avenue. We provided more than 1,500 delivered meals on a daily basis to our seniors to accommodate those who used to attend our cafes in the park and other congregate sites. We've assisted in the organization and primarily staffed the weekly county food distribution events. And despite the pandemic, we continue to provide more than 90% timeliness rate in the processing of our SNAP applications, and also reduce the continuous backlog in Medicaid cases based on the number of applications that are filed. We still operate the state's largest consolidated juvenile detention center, and I'm proud to say that during the pandemic, we had a very minimal number of detainees who were infected with the virus. We transitioned our Division of Senior Services into our new office space at the Hall of Records, and also initiated a rental and mortgage assistance program to help those impacted by COVID-19. These achievements will not be possible if it wasn't for the employees who work for our various divisions and the support of the administration and the Board of Commissioners. That's it, Mr. President.
Mr. McInerney.
Okay, if I can just look at the, the staffing overall, unable, looking at the payroll register that I went through for citizen services, there were, as I had explained earlier, but I don't know if you heard this, there were a considerable amount in your department of people who showed the paycheck being paid, but subsequently it was reversed. And what I was told by the administration is that those are people on leave. So when I add those up, it came to, in your department, it came to 53 people. Now, I don't know if any of those were other than leaves, but there were 53 people that showed, and this is throughout the department, throughout the entire, cost center. Were there 53 vacancies? I mean, were there 53 people on leave?
Through you, Mr. President, Mr. McInerney, I would just like to add that just on the county funded side of our department, and keep in mind, we have a large grant funded side of our department as well. We have a total of 1,086 positions that are budgeted. So when you mentioned these 53 individuals, it'd be helpful for us to know under which division possibly these individuals show up. My assumption is that the Division of Family Assistance and Benefits, which is the largest division in our department, does have individuals who throughout the year on leaves of absence. The Juvenile Detention Center, which is also a large division within our department, also has individuals who occasionally show up as being on a leave of absence. So it'd be hard for me to answer the question without having information as to who these individuals are. But there are individuals in an organization our size that would be on leaves of absence.
Unfortunately, the payroll register that I had just gave me your department all as one. So that's how I had to analyze it. Unfortunately, I don't have the individual breakdown. I analyzed every salary and annualized it, and that's what it came up to. But that said, I had roughly, if I took those 53 positions out, given what I had in payroll as far as the number of positions that showed up in the payroll register, I had 984 out of 1,084, which is like 100 difference. Does that make sense to you, or?
Through you, Mr. President, in my personnel summary snapshot, I have 983 positions currently filled. So we're one, a difference of one. It depends on when you take the snapshot.
I could have made a mistake, but it's not. Yeah, so we're both right at the same spot. All right. As far as part of those, again, where it gets confusing is part of those could be vacancies, and part of those could be people on leave. Is that correct? Also.
Through you, Mr. President, without looking at the data, it'd be helpful for me to get the information so that I can cross-check. But we do carry, especially in combination due to the pandemic and also because we staff at an optimum number at the Juvenile Detention Center, at any given time, we do carry a large number of vacancies.
All right. I'm just trying to think how I can do that. All right. Well, I'll worry about that later. But again, it would stand to read, I think, that if I'm pulling out 53 and I come to 984, that the rest is vacancies. But again, like you said, I'll have to get that information to you. If we go through this, I mean, when we look at salaries and wages overall, it's $67,290,000, and what's being recommended for the 2021 budget is $67,040,000, a decrease of $250,000. most of that is in the family assistance with a decrease of 452,000. Can you maybe speak to that, how that number came down?
Through you, Mr. President, the Division of Family Assistance and Benefits, again, is the largest division in our department. We have our division head, Keisha Burnett, on our call as well. So I'll ask her to provide some more information. But we are constantly in a position where we're shifting positions based on the needs of our division, and under the leadership of Division Head Burnett, there's been a big emphasis on the timely processing of cases, also the digitizing of case records. So we've converted some vacant positions into more clerical and support positions in order to enable the division to meet its timeliness rate, and also to enable us to effectively digitize the processing of cases. So those positions that we've converted to tend to have lower salaries than some of the administrative positions, which have been part of our organization in the past. So that does account for part of the reduction in salary and wages. I'll ask Keisha to see if she has any more information she wants to share. Director?
Good evening. The other reduction is due to, as Councilman Department Director Ramos said, by me converting the titles. However, because of the pandemic and because of the increase, I now have to hire some more workers with higher salaries. We always leave a little balance so we have room to play in case I have to convert titles. But now, because of the pandemic and the increase in the applications, we were not fully staffed at the 832 that we normally are. So I left room so that I could add these individuals.
Right, but overall, your salaries from 2020 to 2021 have actually, decreased.
Could I also add, Frank, that, in addition to us converting positions into vacancies into more technical titles, this is an organization that every year experiences a large number of retirements. So you have employees who have been in the division for many years, who are retiring at the highest step in their salaries, and now we're backfilling those positions on an entry level or step one. So that will account for considerable reduction in the salaries based on the vacant positions that we have.
And that would be true if it increased from the prior year. If the same amount of, so effectively you're saying that probably this year you have more retirements than in possibly the year before.
I did have more retirements than the year before. I also had a number of employees on leave without pay. A number of employees. I have the highest number of employees on leave.
Okay,
but for the purposes of the budget, the number of positions that are budgeted represent full-time equivalents. And the year 2020, we did have a considerable number of retirements. Those individuals retire at the highest step based on their title, and now we're backfilling those positions with either new supervisors or new family service workers who come in at the first step of that salary range. So that will result in a reduction in your overall salary, even if the number of positions stay the same.
Right, but again, Anibal, that's true if it's different and greater than the same amount of retirements or the retirements in the prior year. So in other words, every year you have retirements, that situation for salary savings would be applicable. So that's where I get to the point that if you're saving money this year, your retirements this year, and that differential between somebody going out and somebody coming in would have to be greater than the retirements of the prior period, because it's happening all the time. So, and that's what the question was, is there more retirements now?
Yeah, 2020 was a year where we experienced a large number of retirements. I can get an analysis over a 5-year period. That in combination with us converting titles or vacancies into more technical clerical titles will result in a reduction in the overall salary number. So.
Okay, so again, why don't we just go through each of these real quickly? I mean, overall, as I said, the salaries and wages are actually decreased by 250,000, and the other expenses are down by $3.7 million. So overall, you're coming in at $110 million as opposed to $114 million in the prior year. It's a reduction of $4 million. And again, most of that is in other expenses in family assistance and benefits.
Well, that's,
And even if I may, that's due to the non-payment of rent.
That's the non-payment of rent, okay?
Can we just for the record, if you're going to speak, just let us know who's.
Yes, the Carlos Gonzalez, the CFO of the department.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. President, Aníbal Ramos, I would also add that there were some costs identified in the 2020 budget that were consistent with our move to 321 University Avenue. There were a number of items that we included in the budget that are not included in the 2021 budget as well. So as the CFO mentioned, there are savings associated with us moving into the new complex as it relates to the rent, but there were some costs identified in the 2020 budget that empowered the division to make that move into 321 University.
and of those expenses, this is Director Burnett, of those expenses, other services were the 3 contracts that we had for parking when we were at 18 Rector.
Right.
So we're saving that cost as well. We had 3 separate contracts.
Yeah, Carlos Gonzalez again. That was included as part of the rent in most cases. The parking lot for the garage, for the military park, and 2 other parking lots. The one with the parking authority of the county, and the other one next to the welfare office on the same street as the welfare office that we pay for some employees. So we had 3 parking lots that were included also in the rent payments.
Okay, so 3 parking lots where you're saving the rent.
Yes.
Okay, so if you look at the 3.7 million reduction in other expenses in family assistance and benefits, 2.8 of that is the reduction in rents, both on 18 Rector as well as the parking garages.
Through you, Mr. President, that is correct. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there were some other expenses that we allocated in the 2020 budget that were connected to our move to 321 University Avenue.
Right. And then there's also a reduction of the state computer equipment of $1.4 million as well. What was that?
Through you, Mr. President, as part of the move, we did purchase equipment, new computers for our employees at 321 University Avenue, and we were able to get the state to reimburse us for part of the equipment costs.
Let's, if I can, let's move on to youth services. And budget for salaries and wages in 2020 was $12,428,000, and it's for 2021 it's $12,580,000. So there's a 1.2% increase, and I'm assuming that that's primarily based on contractual increases minus the salary savings.
Through you, Mr. President, yes.
And so there's only $152,000 increase on $12,500,000. In addition, the other, as we said, the other expenses are left the same in 2021 as they were in 2020. And actually, from what the summary sheet shows is that the positions dropped also by 2, from 240 to 238.
Through you, Mr. President, the two positions that are not in the table of organization anymore, we were able to fund those two positions out of the Youth Services Commission grant. These are staff members who are involved in the monitoring of juveniles that are on home detention or electronic monitoring. So we were able to include those in our grant with the state's Juvenile Justice Commission. And I would also add that the other expenses are primarily allocated to the school that's run out of our juvenile detention facility to contract with the Essex County Educational Services Commission, and also the medical contract at our facility. And I do have Reverend Dennis Hughes on the Zoom. Well, this isn't Zoom. This is some other platform available to answer any additional questions.
If I may say, of the Carlos Gonzalez, again, CFO, of the 4,865,000, 4,380,000 is the two contracts for education and medical. So everything else remained the same except for those, including those two, that was the same amount for last year.
Carlos, that's the 4,387,02 you're talking about?
Yes.
Why was only 2,000,002 expended in 2020?
I suppose we haven't paid, at the time, we had not paid for the school and the medical, the portion that was due at the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. President, and Reverend Hughes could attest to us, we do have some billing delays as it relates to the Educational Services Commission. So right now we're in the process of just finalizing payment on some of the bills that are being reviewed.
So that's, Adibel, that's pretty much expended, that, the difference between those two. So that's a contract. So you're going to expend all of that 4,380,000, I would assume.
Through you, Mr. President, the anticipation is that we will expend that.
And if I may, Carlos Gonzalez again, we recover a big portion of that amount through the sharing agreements that we have with the other counties.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. President, basically what we do is we take the daily population, consolidated daily population, and it's divided. The contract for the school and medical is divided based on the percentage of the overall population that each county accounts for. So that is part of the revenue that the county collects back from the other counties that contract with us, where we house their juveniles at the facility.
Mr. President, I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Does that complete your presentation, Director Ramos?
It does, Mr. President, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I also have Maurice Brown here. We do have a very small portion of our division of senior services that is included in the county budget. The bulk of it is grant funded to answer any questions that you may have regarding senior services.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes. First of all, I want to take it and commend Director Ramos for the job that his directors and his employees have done during this pandemic, because this was a very crucial time here in Essex County. And I must say that you guys came through with flying colors, and I applaud you for the job that you've done with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Commissioner Seymour.
I would like to reiterate Commissioner Johnson's statements. Under these circumstances, you have done such an outstanding job with your agency. It's unbelievable how much work you have done under these really terrible, terrible situations. The one thing I am hearing, and I know that Maurice Brown is connected with this, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback about the food that is being delivered to the homes of people who can't go out to get it. And I hear a lot of appreciation for how great you are doing in that regard. So thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner McConnell, then we'll get to Vice President. I'll see you.
Yes, Mr. President, I just want to echo my colleagues and Director Ramos. I want to extend my sincere appreciation to you, your staff, all the directors, Director Burnett, Brown, Hughes, and all the staff. Your department was probably hit the most through this pandemic, whether it was the seniors or the family benefits and assistance. Your staff have done a phenomenal job. The food distribution, we can go on, and I just want to thank you and your leadership team for your efforts and your leadership.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Director Ramos, your staff, you and your staff really deserve a tremendous amount of credit. I think it was a unique opportunity for me personally to, on a weekly basis, work with your staff and yourself, not just in a reporting basis, but actually doing the food distribution. And it is in those unique times that you get to see how well the staff works, how they were there for each other, and how they just, took charge of the situation. And it is to be commended. 30+ weeks of food distribution is quite an impressive task, and they did it very well. And I think that the signature approval on that is the people, about 1,000 or so on a weekly basis that we see drive off, and they come back every week, and they're very happy with it. So hats off to you and to your department for excellent work. I'm very, very proud to have been there with you.
Thank you so much,
Mr. Vice President.
And I just want to say that the staff definitely appreciates you coming out on a weekly basis to our food distribution event, and they definitely are encouraged by your presence along with the other freeholders. Commissioners.
Vice President,
it's going to happen a couple of times.
I don't think you miss very many of those food distributions, and I take my hat off to you for your participation. But I too want to echo everything that the other commissioners said about Commissioner Ramos and his department for all that they do and what they continue to do, because it's not over, and they're still out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Brown, you have something?
Commissioner President, I believe Commissioner Graham wanted to say something.
Okay, Commissioner Graham.
I don't want to repeat everything that was already said, but I just want to say I appreciate you guys, and you guys do an excellent job, and I'm just happy to be a part, being a part of the food distribution. So just keep up the great work.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We're always happy to see you.
Yep. Mr. Brown, something you'd like to say? You'd like to add?
Only that I'd like to thank my director for his support and the commissioner's support, because I've seen many of you out there working, supporting us, helping in any way you can. So I'd just like to say thank you as well.
Maurice working out of his fancy office down at the Hall of Records.
Yeah, I've seen it. Very nice. So that concludes that presentation. Where are we with time, Madam Clerk?
Mr. President, this is the first time we're doing this virtually, and normally when we're in the building, we can, if we're finished a little early, we can move things forward. So, Mr. President, I suggest that, we can take the scheduled break, or if the next group is on, that may be a problem. So perhaps we're about 15 minutes, finishing earlier. So perhaps we'll go just take the break and return at the scheduled time at 6:30. That is just something to consider.
So-
Commissioner President.
Yes.
Might we be able to take the freeholder and administration budget now? Instead of later tonight, moving that up now to work on that and then take our break at the scheduled time?
I have no objections.
It's not on, where is it? Is it on the schedule? Yeah.
Yeah, it's last.
I'm not used to commissioners in it yet. I didn't see freeholders.
Is it on the schedule?
It is.
Yes, and Mr. President, that's a viable option if you choose to do that. We can
let's
do
do it.
that and then take the break after
Absolutely.
that.
Is it the last,
I second that, if we can do that.
is it the last
I
item
agree.
on the agenda?
It is.
Yes, 10
Okay,
o'clock.
thank you.
Let's
Okay, yeah,
move it up. Let's get started.
all right.
Mr. President, that's your budget.
Correct. Who's doing the presentation? That you, Mr. McInerney?
I'll be glad to do the presentation. Let me bring it up here. I obviously have something separate set aside, but I didn't expect it. So just give me a second here.
Sure.
Let me find it. Well, I could speak to, let me just go, I do have an analysis that I believe we went over, Mr. President, the last time we were in your office. So if we would just want to look at the summary, county legislative offices, you see that in the other expenses do not change from the prior budget in 2020, and that in total our salaries are $1,878,944 last year budgeted. Just about all of that was expended, and this year it's up to $1,991,000. It's up about $85,000. Excuse me, over the prior year. That breaks down to the $85,000 increase. It brings it from $1,031,000 to $1,016,000 for the Board of Commissioners. The commissioners. The clerk's budget is up $27,000 or 3.2%. That is all contractual. There's a couple increments in there. There's absolutely no additional personnel in the clerk's office. Other expenses are $817,000. Of course, that includes $348,500 for the county audit that's charged to our budget. So our other expenses from 2020 are basically rolled over to 2021, and there's no change in those amounts appropriated as well. So overall budget is increased by $112,000. Again, the $85,000 in freeholders and the $27,000 for contractual increases in the clerk's office. There is going to be, and it's not in the budget yet, but there's been some discussion, and I think there's a resolution coming or an ordinance to increase the freeholders' aids. I don't know where that's at this point. I've heard about it, haven't seen anything on it. Unless Mike, is Michael still on here? Mike, do we have something on that, an increase in the? I don't know if he can hear me. Yeah, but that's, from what I understand, that's going to require an increase in that budget line item as well. Yeah, so to be honest with you, we are pretty much under expended every year in our other expenses. I will increase because of that, if you decide to move forward, the increase in the amount allocated for freeholder aids, but there's still plenty of room in our budget to absorb that. So that's about it, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Mr. Polavecchio.
I don't know if you can hear me or not, but nothing in addition. I can speak to the freeholder of the commissioner legislative aids if you wanted to. It's an addition of $5,000 in the aggregate per freeholder. And I think the last increase was 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. President, one other point, some of the reductions in the spending this year were based on the fact that the freeholder, the commissioners didn't have any, events which take place throughout the year. So those expenses will be budgeted this year, although they weren't not incurred in 2020. And as well, we didn't have any seasonal help in the clerk's office. That was $25,000. That's still in there. Obviously this year for 2021, it's assumed that we will have some temporary help in the clerk's office during the summertime.
Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Commissioners. Commissioner Gill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. McInerney answered my question. I was just curious. He actually just addressed it. I'm assuming we're going to see the same for calendar year 21, at least for the first 6 months of the year in terms of events. So, but he had answered my question about where the savings actually came from.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, let's take that short break. We'll come back at 6:30. All right. See you at 6:30, everyone. All right, welcome back, everyone. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Cooper. Absent. Commissioner Gill. Absent. Commissioner Graham.
Here. Commissioner Gill's here.
Commissioner Gill is here. Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Luciano. Absent. Commissioner Mercado.
Here.
Commissioner Siebel.
Here.
Commissioner Vice President Pomares.
Here.
Commissioner President Richardson.
Here. We're gonna now go a little bit out of order. We're gonna move to Administration and Finance, and then we'll come back to the Department of Corrections. Again, thank you for your understanding. Let's go. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Acker.
Addresses what we refer to as contingent. There's a $61,142. And it is, as the name would indicate, it is an expense of last resort. So
Can you tell us what tab you're on?
16. Tab 16. So it's just one line item, and it's to pay for bills that may come in during the year that are not accounted for anywhere else departmentally. As you may have noticed, last year we spent almost $23,000 against this line item. Very small amount when you consider the size of our budget, but every year we do get bills that come in. Departments receive them. They say they don't have it budgeted. They send it to my office as a last resort, and we process it against this line item. Next item would be capital. Last year we had 7 million in this line item. Typically it's $1 million, which goes for the 5% down payment on our annual $20 million bond allocation. But last year it was 7 million. The additional 6 million was 2.2 million for public works improvements to the facade, and the other 3.8 million was for voting machines. There will be $1 million in this line item when the budget is presented for introduction and adoption. The book has 0 in it, but that's a mistake. There will be $1 million, which, as I indicated earlier, is typically what we budget every year for our 5% down payment on the $20 million bond ordinance. Tab 17 is debt service. And within this category, we pay principal and interest on all of our outstanding bonds, as well as interest on notes, which are short-term borrowings of 1 year or less. We didn't have any of those borrowings last year, so therefore we don't have any interest payments for notes this year. So the $127,279,310 is what is required for principal and interest on all of our outstanding bonds. Tab 18 is referred to as deferred and statutory charges. Our pension, police and firemen's retirement system. Last year was 27.5 million roughly. This year it's 29.6. We receive actual bills. So these are to the penny bills that we receive from the State Department of Treasury. The portion for public employees retirement system, PERS, is $15,801,507. Social Security, which is what the employer, Essex County, is required to pay for all of the employees under contract and who are getting paid by the county. And then lastly is a $2 million allocation for our employee retirement system, pension system, which is an old pension system that the county had prior to PERS. And it's a declining amount we are required to pay every year. And this year it's $2 million. Tab 19 is what's referred to as judgments. Since I've been here, which is 2011, there's always been 100,000 budgeted. Nothing ever gets charged to it. So this year there's no budget for it. And then lastly would be tab 20, which is our revenue. Of significance are added and omitted taxes from the towns, which was $2,225,000 last year. It's $1,626,000 this year. Our parks revenue, as you heard when Danny was here, is down from 15.4 million. We have budgeted 13.3. I'm just trying to pick out the more significant revenue line items. Interest on investments last year was 4.8 million. This year it's 1.4 million. A reflection of the interest rate environment, as well as cash available to invest. Delaney Hall, 20 million. It's the same as what we had last year. Federal inmate housing, we had 47 million and change last year. In 21, it's 38.3 million. State aid is state aid. And then there's maintenance of patients. These are numbers that the state tells us to put in the budget and pay the state for the county's share of indigent patients in psychiatric facilities or at our hospital center. Rest is pretty self-explanatory. Certainly, I can answer any questions any of the freeholders may have, if you please.
Thank you, Mr. Acker. Before any questions, I want to recognize Commissioner Cooper for being here. Thank you. Mr. McInerney.
Yes, if, let's stay on revenues while we got the page open.
I'm sorry, Mr. McInerney, and Commissioner Luciano as well. Thank you.
Mr. President, for the record, please recognize Commissioner Cooper.
I did, yes. Thank you. Mr. McInerney.
Yes, Mark, we had an analysis given to us of the breakdown of revenues from Parks and Recreation, which said that the total revenue collected in 2020 was $12,530,000. Here it's $10,551,000. I asked Dan Salvante what that was. He said the numbers were probably updated. Which number do you have the confidence in? The 10,000,005 or the one that Dan Salvante handed us when he was presenting his budget?
I would think the 10,000,005. My office updated these numbers yesterday. So that's what we have as of yesterday. Perhaps the 12 million and change Dan was talking about is gross revenue, which would include taxes that are not reflected in the 10.5 million, since that's revenue that we don't collect. The parks collects gross revenue, including taxes, and then they're required, obviously, to remit those taxes to various reporting agencies. So the 10.5 we have is net. I suspect the 12 and change Dan was referencing was what they would call gross revenue.
And those taxes, are those sales taxes?
Yeah, yes.
All right. All right. The federal inmate housing was 47,045. We collected 39,395. Explain the impact that reduction has or doesn't have on the budget. It's my understanding that it's offset on the other side, as well, and there's a reduction in the federal inmate housing revenues.
Correct, Frank. Within the corrections budget, that particular line item that they have in there is also decreased. Not necessarily dollar for dollar, but it's proportionate.
It's proportionate. Okay. So it really doesn't have that much. I mean, there's an $8 million difference there between what was budgeted and collected. It doesn't have an $8 million impact on the county budget.
No, because it's reflected on both sides.
Right. I guess the state assumption prosecutor, that 1.8 million, that pilot program, I think we squeezed as much out of that as possible. Is that over with?
I think it is.
Okay.
I believe it is. Yeah.
All right. And I guess the big increase is in the hospital center state aid that jumps by $11 million. And again, I spoke to Aníbal Ramos when he was before the commissioners, and basically I'm sorry, I was dealing with Frank DelGuardio, who indicated that patient days as well as cost have an impact on this. And this number basically comes from the state. So that 48.8 is a fairly good number, he says. And would you concur with that $11 million increase is realizable?
Yes, the per diem rate, actually, I just received a copy of the letter from the state yesterday or today, indicated our per diem rate is $913.99. And that's a double-digit increase over this year. So that double-digit increase reflects in the 10 or $11 million increase between 21 and 20 on the revenue budget.
Okay. And the confinement of prisoners is down this year too. Why would assume it would drop by almost $2 million or over $2 million? We collected 10,271,000 and it's down to 8 million, 7.9.
There was I guess it was the SCAP program. We received 2 years of an allocation in 1 year, which was last year. So this reflects no receipt of that SCAP for this year, whereas last year we received 2 allocations. So 2 in last year's budget, 0 in 21.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. And under capital surplus, we have there's nothing recognized last year. This year it's $7 million. Is that a combination of bond premiums and cancel improvement authorization, or is it mostly bond premiums?
No, it would be a combination of both.
So there was capital surplus there last year as well, but we allowed it to accumulate, and then obviously we have the opportunity to anticipate it from the general capital fund to the current fund, correct?
Correct.
All right. Last but not least is the tax increase, and that's only a 0.5% increase over the prior year, which is extremely nominal. Given the reductions in some of our revenues this year, I should say in 2020, I guess there were some adjustments made on the appropriation side and ability to charge off maybe COVID, because we really, from what I looked at the AFS, we came up with about $1 million more in our results of operation than we anticipated in surplus in the 2020 budget. So it's surprising, and actually it's great that you were able to, actually bring in more into surplus than was taken out of surplus by $1 million.
Yeah, as you know, Frank, every year you hope to regenerate what you budgeted, what you anticipated as revenue.
Right.
Unfortunately, we've been able to do that pretty much year in, year out, including 20, which was pretty exceptional.
Right. All right. Let me just go back to some of the other ones. I'm not concerned about contingent. As far as capital goes, you said you're going to put $1 million back there. We're not doing any more, because one of the reasons, obviously, you were able to do that is we're not anticipating appropriating any monies directly for capital improvement out of the current budget. If we have to do capital improvements, I'm assuming, we'll go through the general capital fund and do, capital ordinance. So last year we were able to fund some of our capital needs out of the operating budget, but again, do you think you might go back to that in the following year in 2022, or? Because that's
primarily, Frank, will depend upon the results of operations.
Right.
If we happen to generate more than 36 million that we have in revenue, substantially more, for whatever the reason, revenues come in much stronger than anticipated, et cetera. If that were to happen, I suspect the executive would look to use the overflow of revenue, if you will, to fund capital improvements, so he doesn't have to borrow for it.
Gotcha. All right, and on debt service, the only question I have on there is, we don't have notes. We're sitting on a very large surplus, cash surplus, which means we have cash in the bank, so we don't need to go out and borrow on tax anticipation notes or any short-term borrowings for operating expenses. So that's positive. Are we still anticipating a significant drop in the annual debt service appropriations come, I think it's 2024, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, we are, and I think it's either 23 or 24 it starts.
Right, and
then
that's
over a 3-year period, our debt service will drop 70 million as far as what we have to budget.
Right. A very, very large amount. So we look forward to that. We don't have any deferred charges, prior year deferred charges, which is actually
prior year bills.
Yeah.
Those, as you know, if we get bills 2 years or older, we're required to pay them in this line item, which is prior year bills. And it's just there for bills that are at least 2 years old.
Right.
Or
and weren't budgeted for. Everything else, like you said, under statutory expenses, that's all bills that you received. The only other one was the development fees, and development fees are amounts paid to the collective bargaining units under contractual agreement, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that's pretty much it, Mr. Ackler, that I have on this, Mr. President.
Through you, Mr. President, I had noticed that Commissioner Luciano joined us, but I don't see him now, but I just wanted to state that for the record.
There he is.
So Commissioner Luciano has joined us, Mr. President.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And Commissioner President, I'm sorry I keep going off camera. I really don't feel good. I had my second vaccination shot today, and I feel terrible. So just letting you know.
Feel better. Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Evans, any questions?
Apologies, Commissioner President. No questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Acker.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Jackson, we're gonna move to, back to the top.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Sacker.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
Mr. Ortiz and his team are here to present.
Good evening, commissioners, Mr. President, through you. With me are my business manager, Mr. Orlando Camacho, and a gentleman who's no stranger to this body is he's now a consultant, Mr. David Boyd, the former business manager. He'll chime in as may be necessary. But a quick overview of the correctional facility is routine operations. The count tonight at 2 p.m. was 2099. The ICE count is 224. Our biggest challenge since the last time that we were before this body for the budget has been the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a daily, it requires daily vigilance and out of the box thinking to accommodate, the loss of in-person visits, volunteers and religious services. So we're doing a lot of that now through video and or tablets. And that's a blessing because we implemented that tablet right before, but we didn't realize how handy that would come in to include funeral services, that we don't have to take individuals to the funeral, but they can honor their loved ones and whatever via the tablet. That's a very good innovation. Fortunately, we are blessed to have a stellar medical director who reports that since the pandemic, only 8 inmates / detainees have been duly affected by the COVID-19 that require external higher level of care. They've all recouped and are back at the institution. And we're very proud of the fact that, with regard to having some individuals really affected by the COVID-19, we've been managing it very well. We are now implementing a spare vaccine program where the sites where the vaccines are occurring, instead of just, we're getting the spare vaccine that is left over, and we are vaccinating our inmates and detainees, especially the ones with the chronic care that require those things, are immunocompromised, et cetera. We've also begun vaccinating our staff, and that's ongoing. We anticipate the restart or the resumption of the reentry program in the near future. We continue to have a positive working relationship with our partners to include ICE, Marshals, Union County, outside hospital, police departments. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys may have, this body may have. And that's it for me for now.
Mr. McInerney.
Mr. Ortiz, how are you?
Hi, how are you, sir?
Good, good. David, good to see you.
Same here.
If I look at your budget overall, I'm looking at a increase in salaries and wages of $1,078,000, which is in your salaries and wages, your base salaries and wages. So it goes from $69,954,000 to $71,033,000. That's 1.5% overall. That includes overtime and holiday pay. The actual increase in the base salaries is 1.8, and I'm going to assume that that's predominantly the increase that is required to the collective bargaining agreements.
I'm going to defer that particular question to my business manager. Mr. Camacho is here with us. Camacho, are you there?
Yes. So the increase of 580, it's also driven by new positions that were created within the operation side of the facility, and also due to COVID-related posts that were also created in 2020, which carried over into 2021, and we foresee those posts continuing throughout this year. So that's also factored into the increase in salary.
So if I look at correctional services itself, the table of organization goes from 685 last year, of which 678 was filled, up to 740. So that's an increase of 55 positions. Where are those? And those are funded within that 1.8%?
Through you, Mr. President, that is correct. A lot of the positions that, again, not to sound redundant, COVID-driven, it was several positions to include quarantine housing units, rover positions, positions to monitor PPE, isolation units. So we did have quite a few positions, an increase.
Right, but I'm saying with 55 new positions, and the requirement to increase based on the collective bargaining agreement, which I believe was 2%, maybe it was a little higher, 2.5. All of that fits into that $1 million increase, $1,078,000.
Yeah, see, what happens is when we have people that retire, they're retired at a higher salary. All the new hirees coming in are hired at a lower salary. So
I know, but I just had this conversation with Mr. Ramos. That only applies if the retirements are greater in this year than they were in the prior year. Retirements happen every year. So that would, those savings, if they were equal, if the same amount of people retired last year as this year, those savings would be already in the 2020, budget. So, the only, like I said, the only way that applies, that theory applies, is if the retirements are greater in 2021 than they were in 2020. It happens every year, retirement. So it's difficult to assume that is, a reason for a large amount of savings. Now, I know you have a significant amount of vacancies in there, and one of the things I did want to talk to you about was one of the things I noticed this year too was I see the number of them in your department where there's in the payroll register there's salaries that are paid to people but then automatically reversed. And I, as I explained earlier to the commissioners, that was explained to me that those are based on leaves. Those are people that are out on leave, and I had a very significant amount of those. I had a fairly significant amount of those in corrections. Is it true that there are a lot of people on leave in your department?
Yes, sir. It is true. We do have a lot of individuals on leave.
Okay.
FMLA, correct.
Right. Okay. So that helps too. I mean, there's attrition in that. And in addition to that, there's also vacancies, which according to, like you said, there's 55 new positions, but there's 53 vacancies as of the printing of the budget. Are those vacancies fairly consistent with what they are now?
Yeah. So right now, as of last week, we had 583, right? And we requested 580. So as of last week, we had 29 retirees that were eligible to retire, 29. And we also had 25 officers that began their training last week on January 16th. So as we know, in the law enforcement community, there is a balancing act. So what we do is with the people either retiring, resigning because this is just not for them, or resigning because they're going to other departments. So we continue hiring to continue that, that balancing act to maintain and stay within the 580 realm.
Okay. All right. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a 1.5% increase in your overall salaries and savings. It's very difficult to argue with that. You're probably making up a portion. A lot of your new hires, you are making up through attrition and through salary savings that you talked about with retirees and the variance between them and entry level. So yeah, I mean, there's very little to argue. Again, not that I would argue with you, but there's very little to discuss when you maintain that almost parity with the prior year. I'll just ask a couple other questions here. There, with regard to other expenses, there's the professional services line item. Correctional services went up 4.3 million. And then there's another one called Correctional Services Alternative to INC. I'm not real sure what that means, but it's down 3,327,000. Can you just explain those two expenses and the variances, the large variances of them?
Yeah,
One going the other.
Yeah, the 028, the professional services line, that's a direct result of our new medical contract. That contract is reflected within that line item, sir.
Okay.
Now, the alternative to incarceration, that is the program that we have with the state of New Jersey, where where detainees are enrolled in a drug and alcohol program over at Delaney Hall. That is our alternative to incarceration program.
So is that the fee that you pay, the per diem, accumulation of the per diem fee that you pay?
Sorry, sir?
I just want to clarify one thing. Inmates at Delaney Hall, not detainees.
Yeah, inmates. Absolutely, not detainees, just inmates.
All right, so, hold on, I lost my train of thought. All right, so, but is that a per diem is that the per diem? The accumulation of the per diem that you pay over to Delaney Hall?
Yes, it's a fee, that is correct.
All right, we receive revenues on that from the state, don't we, to offset that?
Yeah, what we do is we receive, it's the alternative to incarceration grant that we get from the state of New Jersey. And what we do is we send individuals based on their classification. And of course, the classification and movement into this program is at the discretion of our director. But as you said, Mr. McInerney, all of these costs related to that program are reimbursed directly from the grant.
Right, and the grant is in the revenues as opposed to being offset over here. So we're really showing the revenues coming in on one side and this gets adjusted too. You won't get reimbursed any more than you expend. Is that correct also?
That is correct.
Because that's something that if I look at the revenues, I thought that number was like 20 million at one point. Now, I'll discuss that with Mr. Akron, if that number changes. Right, that number has did we talk? Okay, so as far as vacancies, I know I touched on leaves, but vacancies are listed at 53. Is that close to what they are?
Well, right now, we don't have, like I said, as of last week, the number was 583. So I guess as of when you received your number, sir, we've hired a few officers, which brought our numbers up to the 583.
Okay. Your correction officers are up to 583, correct?
That is correct, as of last week. But we do have 29 that are eligible to retire February 1st.
Okay.
Whether they leave or not, I'm not 100% certain, but they are eligible to retire.
All right. The other thing is on the people that are on leave, are you still budgeting those positions within this budget in full, or at least proportionally?
Yes, they are in the budget.
Okay. So that if they're in there for the full year, that's giving you some attrition and salary savings that there as well, correct?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, so listen, at the end of the day, your expenses are up, really for the size, very nominally, and your salaries and wages are at 1.8% increase. It's a culmination of a lot of things that you just explained. Part of it's the collective bargaining, part of it's the leave, part of it's the vacancies, part of it's the hirings. But in the end, you can't spend any more than 1.8% over what you spent last year. And that's a pretty nominal amount, given that your budget is in salaries and wages over $71 million. So, that's great. That really is. What else do we have? On the police academy side, we have very similar numbers to the prior year, 972, 774 between salaries and wages and other expense, and the same amount for 2021. And on the medical examiner side, And I think that's under you. It's the same. I don't know if that's under your department or not, but it's in there. So, fine, that's all I have. I think it's a very, like I said, a very nominal increase on both sides, other expenses and salaries and wages. Congratulations. And I don't have anything else.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Any questions? Commissioners, anybody? Hearing none.
Commissioner President,
Yes.
through you, if I may, there was discussion with respect to an increase in 55 hires that were COVID related. I was just curious as to whether there was any decrease as a result of COVID.
Macho.
A decrease as far as?
Employment, like if there was a position that may no longer be needed because of COVID.
No, actually, yeah, I'm going to say no. Just the opposite. We actually had positions that were created because of COVID.
Okay.
Mr. President, if I may, but those positions were funded by COVID as well, right? They were charged off to the COVID grant?
Some were, but this year with, there is no clear indication if we're going to continue being able to utilize CARES funds for these positions. So we had a budget accordingly.
All right, so those were grant funded last year in 2020, and they're fully funded now through the operating budget?
Yes,
through
sir.
your operating budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Hearing no other questions, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Jackson.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. County Council Gassion is up next.
Good evening, Mr. President, Board of Commissioners, Mr. McInerney. Thank you for having me this evening. I am pleased to present the 2021 budget for the Essex County Council's office. Like many of the departments that I'm sure have presented to you thus far today, 2020 was a very busy year for our office. The pandemic created some very interesting challenges for our office. I feel that we've adapted well. Much of our staff assisted with the ever-going and ongoing changes that were enacted through executive orders, through rules and regulations, closures, all the issues we had to deal with, on a daily basis, both with regard to our workforce as well as our public buildings and all the public facilities that we run. So it's been a challenging year, but I feel a good year for us as far as our ability to support the rest of the county administration. As I presented to you on prior occasions in these budget hearings, the County Council's office continues to be made up of 4 units. Our County Council staff consists of still 13 attorneys. We'll be holding steady at that number next year. That's 1 County Council, myself, as well as a Director of Labor Relations, 3 section chiefs and 8 assistant county councils. There are 6 support staff, our clerical staff, 3 full-time mental health staff, 2 investigators in our Office of the Inspector General, and 1 part-time administrator in our workers' comp section. Within the County Council's office itself, we still have our governmental affairs section. They continue to be responsible for the representation of all of our constitutional offices. They represent and provide legal representation to all departments. They assist with the Construction Board of Appeals, guardianships, firearm permits, contract and lease reviews, commitment hearings, sheriff sales, and Division of Housing, real estate matters. I'm happy to report that during 2020, we represented the county at 14 different hospitals throughout the state of New Jersey that represented over 2,700 commitment hearings in the interest of the Essex County public. Our Labor Relations and Employment section negotiated 21 union contracts this year, handled approximately 50 grievances. contributed with regard to training department in different departments. They assisted, as I mentioned before, with enacting policies and procedures for our workforce as needed as the pandemic evolved during 2020, and assisted on a daily basis with human resources in dealing with COVID-related issues involving positive employees, contact tracing, notifications to employees, et cetera. We also handled in that section over 70 disciplinary matters, 7 OAL appeals, 9 EEOC charges, and also assisted our Office of Risk Management with several POSH complaints. Our claims section, which is our third section in County Council, handled approximately 87 cases that were assigned to us this year. I'm happy to report that 55 of those were disposed of by either motion, stipulation, or through settlement. We also had a busy year in 2020 in our Oprah section. Our Oprah officer, who is also one of our assistant county councils, handled the incoming over 1,500 Oprah requests that were received through our portal, and those resulted in 35 complaints filed with the GRC, which is the Government's Record Council. That's the appeal body that handles Oprah appeals. And out of those 1,500 some odd Oprah responses, 92% of those have been closed to date. This section also handles the response to all subpoenas and document requests, and also has assisted, especially our Parks Department, with the drafting of ordinances. And then finally, our welfare and support section has handled over 1,500 cases this year on behalf of the County of Essex. This year, we have 16 outside counsel contracts going into 2021. 3 of those are contingency contracts at no cost to the county. 5 are litigated cases, and the total of our outside counsel contracts going into 2021 is approximately $700,000. Our settlement of suits going into 2021 remains at the $1.8 million that it has been for several years. This amount was almost fully expended in 2020. As I presented at last year's budget hearing, we did anticipate several large settlements in 2020. 2 of the 3 cases I had referenced last year did in fact settle last year, so that resulted in a large amount of that money being expended. And the 1 remaining case, we do anticipate hopefully to be settled this year. In addition, our staffing will remain the same. There's no major changes from a staffing or expense standpoint. And I'm happy to answer any questions that Mr. McInerney or the board may have.
Mr. McInerney.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. Looking at the payroll register, I come up with, at least at payroll 1, was 25 employees on payroll for county council. That's in its entirety. Does that sound right? And there'd be 1 vacancy?
Yeah, that includes the OIG as well as mental health, correct?
Yes, it includes. I only have the payroll register that includes all 3. So
yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So there is one vacancy at this time.
We have 1 assistant county council vacancy. That's correct.
Okay. All right. What else do I see here? Right. So we're looking at an increase of roughly 2.2% over the prior year. You're going from 1,893,814 to 1,936,086. That's a $42,000 increase. So I'm assuming the 2.2 has to do with either contractual increases or some sort of merit increases that you do at the county council.
They would be consistent with the contractual increases given through collective bargaining agreements.
What about your attorneys? Are they subject also to collective bargaining, or do you have some opportunity to be a little more flexible with increases?
So they are not subject to collective bargaining agreements, but the county administration does provide them generally with contractually based increases that's consistent with what contractually covered employees get. So they get the same percentage that covered employees would get under a collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, and that's so outside of the, so I'm assuming the vacancy the vacancy's budgeted for. And so the 2.2% increase would be obviously the 2% increase that all your employees are entitled to.
Yes.
Okay. With regard to the, with regard to the settlement of suits, are there any structured settlements in there, installments that that are layered in there?
There is one, Mr. McInerney. There is the total settlement for that case was $150,000 in 2020. The balance is $118,000 payable in 2021.
So of the 1.8 right now, only that installment would be, as far as you know, would be charged against that. Again, not that there won't be others, but the exact amount, the 118 is what will be charged against that, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. As far, the other expenses too, I mean, everything is constant with the prior year, 918,000. And again, there's no increase in any of your other expenses. The only other thing I have a question on would be like, just, are there anything on the horizon that could, obviously I'm not asking for particulars, but anything on the horizon that the commissioners should know about with regard to settlement or a lawsuit that could have a significant impact on the budget? In a negative, I know we're working on things on the positive side, like
Sure.
But on the negative side.
Sure. So there is still the one case I had mentioned at last year's hearing that did not get settled in 2020. That's the case out of the prosecutor's office that we do have a concern could result in a large settlement. It's not a case that I'd want to take to a verdict. So that is potentially one. And then late last year, and the board is aware of this, there was a case filed against the sheriff's department involving a police shooting, which could potentially have we hope to get the case settled very early on, but potentially could be a larger exposure for the county. At this point, those are the only two cases that, in my mind, could have a significant impact financially on the county budget.
Okay, fine. All right. So again, your budget is basically last year's budget with just added the contractual increases. So
that's correct. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions? Evans, any questions?
None.
Thank you very much, Courtney. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Moving on to administration and finance, I will just go over that, and I think it's relatively brief. We're essentially flat in these different areas. It includes HR, obviously accounts and control, management and budget. The major change here is that we moved what's called data processing. It's really our IT function from the administrator's office into the administration and finance department from an accounting budgetary point of view. The function still reports into the county administrator, but we moved the salaries from under the administrator to under the Department of Administration and Finance. Other expenses are flat from last year, and the other functions remain the same. From a staffing standpoint, the same, except for the additional 6 people that come with the moving of the IT function over. Other than that, it's flat.
Mr. McInerney.
Mr. President, thank you. Right, so if you pull out that, so that 582 is coming out of, another budget.
That's correct, Mr. McInerney.
Okay, so if you pull that out of the increase of 643,000 in your salaries and wages, there's about $62,000, which is 1.7% increase, which I'm assuming, again, represents any collective bargaining, increases that are required.
That is correct.
Okay. I mean, I have these all lumped in one as opposed to broken out individually. So I'm not interested in really going through each one of them. I think the fact that it's a 1.7% increase in salaries and wages and a 0 increase in other expenses, speaks to itself. So the only, as far as, I was wondering if you could just add some light on something though I said before with corrections. I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Acker or you, Mr. Jackson, but when I looked at that number of expenditures going out for Delaney Hall, I should find something similar in the revenues, correct?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understood the question.
Okay, so what I'm saying is when we adjust, when we look at the grant that we get from the state of New Jersey, Department of Corrections, for the per diems that we pay to Delaney Hall, should those two revenues match? Should the revenue match what that expenditure is? And again, I'm sorry for broaching this to you, but
don't feel comfortable answering that one, Mr. McInerney. Okay. I will get with the troops and get an answer back to you.
Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Any questions from the commissioners? Or Evans?
No question, Commissioner.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for that presentation. And let's go to the next.
All right. General government, essential expenses. General expenses.
I believe, through you, Mr. President, Mr. McInerney, did Mark go through that already?
Yes.
Okay. What else do we have? Then after that, I believe that's it.
That's it.
Yes, I agree, Mr. President. I believe that completes the agenda for today.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the commissioners?
Mr. President, can I just make one comment?
Sure.
The half, just for purposes of the record, the half hour for each one of those line items called central expenses, debt service, unclassified, with the exception of maybe revenues, is a significant amount of time for those one line items. So the reduction of the schedule from what we anticipated to be to now is a direct result of that. That we budgeted way too much time for those items.
Thank you, sir. Duly noted. If there are no other questions or comments, we need a motion to adjourn.
I'll move it.
All in favor?
Second.
So move. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
I can't believe we're done so early.
Good job, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow.